Welcome to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. I am Devin Bedoni.
And I'm Uriel Eisen.
And today we're going to follow up on our focus from last week on production leveling with more discussion about production management. Specifically, how do we figure out what we're doing from minute to minute? Sounds like a simple thing, but it turns out to be a very challenging thing to tackle, especially in a system where you work on a build to order or a pull system. Excuse me. We're also going to go over some listener questions related to tooling, how to get started on this stuff, best way to implement your time and money. And then we'll go over some of our little improvements and failures from this last week.
Yeah, sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Also had a little quote I heard this week that I quite liked. It's attributed to Einstein. Whether or not he said it, I don't know. Said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. Just kind of really resonated with a lot of the stuff I've been reading about lean and TPS.
I think it also I feel like in our conversations over the last 2 years, there's been a slow shift in how we kind of approach problems.
I think that's true.
Which is, and it resonates with that. I think there was speaking for myself initially, I feel like often I would kind of come at it with like, well, here's my formulaic kind of solutions. And now I feel like there's a lot of like, okay, what's the problem? Okay, what's really the problem?
Yeah.
Okay, what's actually the problem? And then it seems like once we kind of get to a spot where we're like, okay, pretty sure that might actually be the problem, then sort of starting to tackle solutions.
Yeah, I would say Toyota says ask why 5 times.
Yeah.
I would say maybe I started at 1 time and now maybe I'm at 3 times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Similar.
Still some work.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I like it.
So some thanks for the questions, by the way. We picked a few of them to throw in here and try to talk about briefly. One is around standardized tooling and redundant tooling to prevent downtime.
This is a big topic, honestly, but
it is.
I think it cannot be overstated that standardized tooling is important for a variety of reasons. I think so. Like, if we're putting this in the context of machining, maybe we should put it in a different context for conversation's sake. If we were to put it in the context of a kitchen again, I feel like a kitchen is kind of a cool thing because it's like this production. It's this production system that we all interact, like everybody interacts with in one way or another. And we kind of understand the concepts. But if you had a production kitchen where every single order required a new size pan, it would obviously it wouldn't work. So you have to kind of decide, I'm going to have, several 10-inch skillets. I'm going to have a few saucepans that are medium size, a few saucepans that are small, and one big pot.
Yeah. And I think like something I think about a lot is sort of in design, in terms of systems and mechanical design and every type of design, is sort of like thinking about what the limits of the space are, of the solution space. So like if you push it to the absolute extreme of having 1 pan per thing you cook and never needing to reuse it,
sure,
that's interesting. And I think it's also useful. So a pan is a good example because it makes it very obvious because of its size relative to the size of a kitchen, right? You can't store 1,000 pans. I think the problem is that in a shop, you can just rent a bigger and bigger shop, which tends to be what people are doing anyway, right? As you grow.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is if you're dealing with like end mills or something really small, it can seem trivial because you can just stick it in a drawer, right? You can have thousands of these things. But I think exploring the limits of the space tells you that there's a lot of waste built into that approach in general, and that you should actually approach the other limit, which is having one tool to do everything, which is obviously unrealistic as well.
And somewhere in that middle space is a good solution.
Yeah.
I sort of fell into this just out of necessity, running not a lean shop as in lean manufacturing, but a lean shop as in not having a lot of capital. And also being sort of like strapped for time and not wanting to spend a bunch of time researching new tools and not wanting to spend a bunch of money on extra tools. So these are, I guess, our lean principles. They just kind of fell into it by accident because it's
Same way Toyota did.
a necessity. I just started essentially buying the same tools over and over that kind of worked. I tried other stuff, and the stuff that I didn't tend to repeat order stopped being a standardized tool. And then this was actually the first thing that we applied Kanban to in our shop was tooling.
Interesting.
To like take it one step further to make sure that we never ran out, because I would still kind of manually manage that inventory. And I think this is another place we were talking about a few episodes back about automation in small shops and taking cues from prototype shops instead of production environments. A lot of the articles I've read about very successful prototype shops have a standardized tool library that they never vary from.
Interesting.
So as far as I understand,
right.
It's hard to imagine never any variation, because there's like, you get weird features like an internal O-ring groove or something, and you got to have a key seat cutter probably, or maybe they just don't take that job. I don't know, but I think,
or maybe they have some key seat cutters set up as standards.
Possibly. I'm thinking of one in particular article where the guy was like, we have 30 tools. They're the same in every machine, and we cut every part with those 30 tools.
I would guess they have 30 tools plus 3 or plus 5.
It might
that
be,
sort of go in there.
Yeah. But I think it's really important. And that if we take it back into the machining space, that flows through to your CAM programming. It makes your tool library management and programming so much simpler. It makes your setup simpler. And reduces your total cost in tooling. So kind of can't be overstated how important it is.
I mean, 5S'ing is like a big thing. Like anytime people talk about lean, 5S'ing and sweep, sort, standardize is 3S'ing.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really, really up there as a easy way to, maybe not easy, but as a very available way to reduce capital investment, reduce time searching for things, reduce failures because you forgot to program it correctly and you put in the wrong feed per tooth. And then in terms of preventing downtime, I think that touches on the Kanban idea. So for us, we have a drawer of our standard production tools that are all Kanban at an appropriate level. And sort of all the information you need on each tool has a bin. So like even for our gripper, and that has spare parts like screws and those bushings that go in the fingers.
I need to get some of those.
They're pretty cheap. So that's big. I mean, there's a funny one, like we have the phase converter to go from single phase to 3-phase in the shop, and that has these capacitors.
Oh yeah.
And I was just thinking about, like, do we stock those to prevent downtime? Apparently they have a shelf life and they should be good for about 3 years. So do I set a calendar reminder at year 2 to order new ones and have them on hand? Do you just commit to spending $50 to overnight them, and then the rest of that day when it goes down is you're out? I don't like.
I don't know. It might just be an on schedule thing, like a sort of taking a cue from like aviation or commercial shipping.
Oh, true. Where
you just do it. You just replace it on schedule regardless of whether it's necessary.
Probably the move.
You kind of treat it like the batteries, your backup batteries in your machine. Basically, like you just change these every year just because you do, regardless of whether they're bad.
Yeah, and I guess also that's how people treat tooling, which is something I really need to tackle, is tool life management and proactively change things instead of after you start seeing issues in your parts. I mean, just the relative cost of, like, for me, we're doing aluminum with carbide tooling. I mean, we get thousands of parts off each tool, assuming we don't break them. But that's only really our roughing mill that sometimes breaks when parts lift out of the vise from our automation not loading them properly. Anyway, it's preventing downtime. I think that comes to like managing your Kanban quantities properly, assuming that's how you're going to do it. And like all this stuff, I think that stuff becomes extremely apparent once you organize other systems in the shop. Like as you start to reduce inventories, as you start to reduce buffers in different places, as you approach single piece flow, these failures, which I think we're going to talk about a little more later, more in depth, but these failures start to become very clear where before you start systemizing the different processes in the shop, I think everything is so unstable and so variable that it's hard to pinpoint exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So like what we've found is definitely as we've organized different systems, like we had, and this is a funny example, we had a rubber band. We have a rubber band that actuates one of our assembly fixtures, and it does work. And the rubber band broke, and we didn't have a backup rubber band. And I spent 10 minutes looking around for a rubber band, and that was in like production, right? So like our assembly station stops for 10 minutes while I'm like looking around for a 3-cent piece that we just didn't have Kanban and we didn't have standardized. And so like, yeah, I don't know, like these things matter. And
totally. Well, should we jump into the next one?
I think we should probably hit a little faster pace.
I guess he did put redundant in there as well. I don't think either of us run redundant tooling in the machine.
Not in the machine.
So that's something I can't really speak to.
Well, we do keep redundant tooling in the shop.
In the shop.
Yeah. I don't know if that's what he meant, but
I'm not sure. Yeah. Rules of thumb for getting started as a noob.
I would say the fact that you're aware of this podcast and writing in, you're started. I mean, honestly, for me, it was just getting like super intrigued a couple years ago. And then it's like, oh, what do I do next? And I started reading books. Reading books is
I think reading books is important. You've done a lot more reading than I have. But that was definitely kind of like a turning point for me in like actively engaging in this.
Yeah. I would say in general, like being curious about it is definitely step one, but the biggest thing, and I think like coming around to actually spending time every day doing this stuff is a huge shift. But I would say even just starting with setting aside time to do it once a week, once a month, like whatever it is to actively set aside time to start doing it. I think once you start doing that, you will slowly increase the amount of time that you're committing to improving. And I don't think that improving necessarily needs to be working on your processes. It can also be on researching the subject. Like I have a friend who is sort of like begrudgingly getting into continuous improvement because I keep bothering him about it. He runs a business and it's like, you got to do it. I don't know.
I would say also like, I find that this has been a pretty organic process, and it's kind of like I integrate what I understand and then sort of delve in a little deeper.
Yeah.
So I'd say like, if there's stuff that you already see that you're not doing, that you're aware of needs to be done or you would like to do, start with that. And once you feel like you've tackled it, you move on to the next thing. The one cool thing about all of this stuff is I don't feel like you can kind of get off on the wrong foot so much. Is like you could like get obsessed about like one aspect maybe too much.
And I did that for sure. What I was going to say is like this is a skill just like everything else, and I think the only way to get better at it is to practice. So the one piece I would say is I think sort of setting aside specific times where you're doing it. Conversely, also then jumping back into like running your business and not doing it, because I think early on it was very easy for me to sort of like pick the wrong process to like refine, and maybe I'm still doing that, I don't know, and then like spend a lot of time refining it, and also just starting off like kind of on the cheaper side. I think if I were to start again, like we've been on this big like color coding kick, and it is so cheap and it is so fast and it is so impactful. It's not sexy from an engineering standpoint, right. From a mechanical engineering standpoint. I think it's really sexy from a human factors standpoint. So I'd probably like, there's Paul Akers 2-second lean. I think it's a very good entry point from a lot of perspectives. There's a high emphasis on low cost improvements, both in time and money. And I think the wisdom there is kind of, you're not going to do a good job when you start, I think, at improving things in a like best bang for your buck kind of. Do you know what I mean? Like
potentially. Yeah. I don't know. I might push back on that a little bit. And then I think there are some like massively impactful things you can do for zero money right at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would say, assuming this, I didn't see who this question came from, but assuming that you produce a product, like if you're not doing single piece flow or not trying to get closer to single piece flow, like start there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of, that's like a foundational principle. And if you start to integrate that, that's going to start to inform everything else in the shop. If you're already doing that, like, yeah, start tackling like small improvements here and there. But like, you do need to start with some foundational principles. I think like you could be improving a lot in the shop, but if you're still running batch processes and stuff and like not doing some of the foundations, then you might be a little bit like putting lipstick on a pig.
Yeah.
It's still helpful, but I think
it's not massively impactful.
Yeah. Whereas like switching from batch processes to attempting a single piece flow will cost $0 and will probably have like I can't even state how big of an impact it's going to have on like how smoothly your processes go and all of these things. So if you're not doing that, start with that. That's my advice.
And I would say even if you don't actually get there, because not many people do, including Toyota.
Yeah.
I think just becoming aware of that as the direction you should be moving instead of the other starts. Yeah, I think that will actually like keep you kind of on track in terms of making good improvements. Because I think the flip side is often, and you see a ton of this in industry, like tool suppliers who have clearly optimized their equipment for bigger batches.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it's a faster per piece through that one station. But yeah, that's a pretty limited view. Yeah, so I guess to summarize all that, I would say definitely read books. Set aside specific times to work on improvements. There's this weird, which we mentioned last episode, a funny dichotomy between like the things we work on are very small things, but I think it's really important to maintain that really zoomed out system view. There's a lot of talk about like Toyota's leaders being good systems thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a big thing that differentiates Toyota, but also people who start working on this stuff, is really making sure that your improvements are moving in a direction that makes for a maximally efficient system, not for a maximally efficient station.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's really easy, especially early on, to start optimizing a station.
Yeah. Next question was best cheap improvement in time or money. This kind of ties into the last one a little bit. I think it depends on your business, on your production system. I'm going to go back to single piece flow. Costs nothing, probably. That's a really hard one to answer because it really is so much.
Yeah. I mean, I would say some super concrete ones for me. Color coding is high on the list.
Sure.
Visual controls is sort of high on the list. Like, I don't know. This is not something we're doing enough of, but like I think it's going to become a bit more of a focus in the coming weeks. I was packing an order the other day and closed up the package and then found a part that was meant to be inside of it.
Uh-huh.
And I think a lot of that is because there's visually too much happening at our shipping station. And so it's not very apparent when something is out of standard.
Yeah.
So I think just like, making that a little cleaner and neater.
I was going to say, and this kind of ties into that, but like rearranging your space is a huge one. And then like optimizing your stations. So early on, I had kind of heard that, like the refrain that lean doesn't apply to job shops and all this, and kind of like veered away from standardized like tooling at the machines. But then pretty quick into it, I was kind of like, well, we use the same tools at every machine every day. So setting up a good station, like in our case, we do all the tooling for a setup, and to run parts is basically at each machine and dedicated. So we have all the Allen keys we need, the torque wrenches, a 1, 2, 3 block for, just lining stuff up or whatever. And those tend to be very cheap, and Lord have mercy, they save a lot of time not having to walk around the shop and find stuff. So that's a huge one.
Yeah, and I would say there's an 8 hour day is 480 minutes. And I think like if you go backpacking and you're trying to have a light backpack, whenever you go through, I've done this a few times, go through someone's gear to help them shave weight.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, oh, but that's only this much weight. It's like, right, because you're not carrying any like huge bricks in here.
Yeah.
So we can't pull anything out that's massively heavy that you simply do not need.
Yeah.
It's all going to be small savings. But I think just like saving 5 minutes out of your day doing like really dumb stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like walking around looking for Allen keys, for example,
Yeah.
that's a big percentage gain. Like if you can shave 5 minutes out of your day, that's like that's almost a 10% or slightly over 10%
Yeah.
efficiency gain. So,
Which, bringing this back to like economics, I don't know what it's like in a lot of other industries, but I would guess it's fairly similar. Decent profit margin in manufacturing tends to be like 15%.
yeah.
So if you can stack a bunch of 10% gains in efficiency through your process, it's gonna make a big difference.
Yeah, and oftentimes that doesn't feed right back into profits immediately,
No.
but by year 3, a lot of people triple their profits. So
Yeah,
You know.
but it's in that same kind of like scale. I think we often are like, these are such small things, and you're like, well,
yeah, but there's no big things.
yeah,
Pretty much, except
Yeah.
rearranging your shop.
Yeah.
Single piece flow. Single piece flow is huge.
It's huge. Yeah,
Shipping
shipping improvements.
Shipping improvements. Yeah, plenty. I think it depends what you're shipping. But again, it comes back to standardization, comes back to, I think, understanding. I think it's easy to get caught in this view that everything we do is an exception, is a unique set of parameters that need to be addressed,
Yeah,
instead of looking for like the common ground across that. So for shipping, if you ship a bunch of one-off items and it's like, well, it's hard to systemize because we pull a bunch of different box sizes and we're using different packing materials depending on the parts you're shipping.
I'd say buy a label printer.
Oh yeah, yeah. Buy a label
Done
printer.
that.
Definitely set up a shipping station. I think that's one thing I saw early on when I started this business was if you're doing e-commerce or if you're shipping frequently, like have a dedicated shipping station.
Yeah,
And it does make a huge difference. And then you have a station where you can sort of start to optimize that.
our shop transitioned from when I was working alone. It was primarily people would pick up their stuff from the shop.
Okay.
And now primarily we ship everything. And it took me a little bit longer than I'd like to admit to set up a dedicated shipping station.
Yeah.
But it made a big difference. I don't actually do the shipping, so I'm not super in depth in it.
Yeah.
But we have continued to refine that, and having everything you need in one spot again comes back to the in-station setup, refining that.
Yeah, and then this covers a few of these questions like cheapest, best improvement. I almost said I don't know if you follow us on Instagram. I just added a bin at each station that has one Sharpie, one pen, and where needed, one utility knife.
Oh yeah.
It is huge.
Yeah.
Huge. There's so much ambiguity when you are holding a pen about where you should put it down.
Yeah.
And then also ambiguity every time you reach for a pen where you should pick it up.
Do you color code them so they?
Not yet, but we will. Yeah, to color code it back to the station.
Yeah.
Yeah. That will happen. But already it's just like I need a pen and there's a pen. I not only know exactly where it is, but I know exactly what I'm going to pick up.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had the approach of let's have a cup of pens at each station because you should never be looking for a pen because they're so cheap.
Yeah.
Turns out that then you just spend some time rifling through that cup to find the one pen you actually want every time.
Or usually they end up there. In your head, you're like, "There's a bunch of pens in here. I don't have to put this one back." And then pretty soon, there's no pens.
Yeah, and then you go hunting for a pen. Yeah. Anyway, so the one pen is way better, and then it's basically breadcrumbed back to a supply of pens. So, which just means whatever. You put a label on there that says, "If you need another pen, go here."
Mm.
Which, speaking of which, we need. With more people in the shop, I'm realizing we need our Kanbans to tell people where to put things back, like where to restock things when they come in.
Oh, yeah.
That's been started to become an issue where we'll have to say, oh, where are the gloves or where are the, so that's an easy fix, but not super easy because right now it's sort of all dispersed.
Yeah.
I think we're going to need a set of shelves or something that is sort of like A1, 2, 3, whatever, and bays or something.
Yeah, or that, like for our tooling, we have a matching Kanban that's a different color in the bin,
Okay.
so that you can just match the
Oh,
card in your
okay.
hand to the card in the thing.
Uh-huh.
You have to have some I
But
mean,
you have one big drawer or one chest of tooling or something
yeah.
like
So
that? Yeah.
it has to be in their general place. But then for
Right.
finding the specific, it
Okay.
seems like there's a variety of ways you could tackle that.
Yeah, or maybe we have a highlight color for storage
Hmm.
items or something. Because at each station, I don't know. Anyway, so something to be done there.
Yeah. Interesting. Finding the balance of developing in-house versus buying. And this ties in with one of your
Yeah,
questions as well. And I think probably there's no answer to this that's across the board,
right.
but maybe there's some sort of a
So
rubric we can we
yeah, I
will
mean, so
develop over time.
Toyota, I think, much to my consternation, every time they talk about developing things in house, they're like it's 3 to 5 times cheaper.
Yeah.
Which just the second you read that, you're like, are they counting engineering time? Are they like? It just seems crazy.
Hmm.
That said, like we mentioned last time, they are quite, they're notoriously rational. So they're probably right. But I was wondering if what they're talking about there are integrations of existing tools. Like if you look at a production line for Toyota,
Hmm.
it is a whole bunch of robots. They are not building the robots. That said, they do have ownership stake in Nachi, I think. But they're not building the robots. They are integrating a bunch of off-the-shelf parts, right?
Uh-huh.
I was thinking about this from a mechanical perspective. If you designed a mechanical system, I'm not sure that Toyota would develop a new bolt or a new nut for that system, right? I don't know if that is 3 to 5 times cheaper to build a nut because those are very available.
It would depend probably on whether it's a the comparison would be if they needed a custom nut.
Yes.
Would
Well,
they do it themselves or
no.
hire it out?
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's worth thinking about which pieces are custom actually
Hmm.
in terms of deciding whether to build stuff in house or send it out.
Hmm.
And I think I'm wondering if what Toyota is encouraging is to shy away from hiring out integration essentially of standard components. I think when you get into software, that becomes really hard because it's sort of a big package. It's not like you're buying I don't even know what the sub pieces of code would be, but
Yeah.
right. So like that gets tricky. But in terms of like, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, okay, a vibratory tumbler.
Yeah.
Should we build it in house versus buying it? That is very near like a standard unit that you can just buy off the shelf. It doesn't have a lot of extra bells and whistles that you don't need.
Right.
And I would say one caveat to that would be, of course, if you need a custom tumbler,
Hmm.
then it likely does make sense to build it in house. But chances are good that you could buy a standard base, or that you could write like a vibratory base and just build your own bowl or something. Like
Probably
I think,
what they're talking about is like if you needed to set up an automated feeding system to a tumbler and an outfeed and stuff like that, like building that whole machine and system as one, you could do in house, but still buying the parts off the
that's sort
shelf.
of my thought is like, yeah, buy the parts, but integrate it yourself so that you understand how it's put together. Because if you're talking about custom machines, and I have friends who build custom machines,
Yeah.
like you are really tied to whoever builds that for you.
Yeah.
In a big way.
Yeah. I built a custom machine for somebody and they were very tied to me.
Yeah. And so I think that said, most of the parts of that custom machine were probably not custom, right? Like
no. Well,
extrusion or
yeah.
a PLC or
I probably should have used more extrusion.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it kind of comes back to the old maybe the dividing line would be sort of like product versus service, where and then the old, like, I don't know what you call it, it's not an adage really, but the saying of like don't make what you can buy.
Right.
And sort of it's like don't make the hardware that you can buy, but do your service if you're going to pay someone a service to integrate those things or to design a system and manufacture it using off the shelf components, maybe that's something you do in house.
Yeah, and I think another reason to do that is you're going to understand your process a lot better. I would say a caveat to that is like approach the problem portion of that like Einstein would,
Yeah.
right? Like spend a lot of time making sure you fully understand the needs of that system that you're thinking about buying, and that is something that you will need to do well anyway if you're going to hire it out.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you're just going to be unhappy with the results, or that working in partnership is not going to be good. I'm keeping an eye on the time here.
Yeah.
We gotta.
One large caveat to that would be that be realistic about your bandwidth.
Yes.
And also your in-house capability. Like we talked about prior, Toyota has a massive engineering team. They have massive, production capacity, etc. So like if you're a one-man shop and you're like going, or a one-person shop doing any kind of business, and you're like full gas every day just keeping up with your stuff, don't expect that you're going to realistically take on a big side building project without that either affecting production or affecting the rest of your life. So
possibly, but if you're building that into that 1 hour a day, like if you're full gas all day, I would still encourage you to take a full hour every day to improve your processes. And if the top, which I find it hard to believe that your top return on invested time and money would be building a custom machine.
Mm-hmm.
So chances are, anyway, yeah.
Anyway,
all right.
Yeah, let's jump into the next thing. So this will be our kind of like main focus, leveling. How we're going to talk about that, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a big problem.
This is something I keep chewing on, and it's sort of tough as you walk into the shop and minute to minute knowing what to do next. I suspect I'm spending a lot of mental capacity and time wandering around aimlessly. Well, not aimlessly. My aim is to figure out what I should do. So it's sort of like, go check on this machine, make sure it's running. Okay, it is running. Well, should I go fill some orders and assemble some buckles, or should I unload the tumbler so we can put in the next batch, or should I go over to the CNC and make sure that whatever's running next is all set up and ready to go? Or do I go paint or rack parts or QC parts, or and assuming certain things, like you walk in the morning and nothing's going. What do you walk over to first?
Yeah.
And so I think what I'm sort of wrestling with is, how much do you build an explicit plan, right? Of like, I walk into the shop, minute 1, I do this, minute 2, I do that. Then I walk here and do that. And the issue with building that very rigid plan is, if you are assuming that your production responds to demand, then what you're going to need to do every day is not exactly the same, with the caveat of production leveling, where if you've properly leveled your production, day to day should be largely the same, but shifting over time. And so does that mean you have a few different plans? Do you build a loose plan of like, right now we sort of have it divided, and this may be backward in a pull system, but we have it divided where before lunch we're sort of focusing on production, and after lunch we focus on making sure the orders for the day get shipped.
Uh-huh.
The rationale there is, once production is sort of rolling, there's a lot of stuff that just happens in the background. Like the mill needs to start and then can run
for a while.
Yeah. The certain like different ovens are running. So like there's a lot of stuff that kind of can go. And then that gets back to like prioritizing your tasks in the shop. There's some tasks which we've started to identify as sort of, I don't know what to call this exactly. There's some processes where you need a little bit of like human time and then run a lot on their own. There's some processes that are these short chunks that can easily be interrupted. For us, that's like assembling buckles, right? It's like 3 minutes per strap.
Yeah.
So if you pause in the middle to go unload the tumbler, and then you can reload the tumbler and it runs for 2 hours again.
Yeah.
Do you interrupt someone to do that? Do you let them finish? I don't know. So and I think there's a ton of time and mental load going on.
Yeah.
Sunk into this like pretty silly problem.
Yeah. And then there's the kind of there's the big picture prioritization, which is kind of like, okay, like these things have to be produced today. and there's prioritizing that. And then
Mhm.
there's the small stuff of like sort of personal in station prioritization, like you're talking about, of like juggling when you walk away from a station to continue another
Right.
process. And they're, obviously related but separate. The in like the personal choices of like, when do I stop this task to go do a different task and come back to this task, I think that's something that either has to be kind of baked into your people, as like, how do you like, yeah, I think you have to kind of have a standard operating procedure a little bit of being like,
Yeah.
these sort of tasks are sort of subject to, or subordinate to these other tasks, because of that kind of thing, where like,
Yeah.
keep this, like we kind of have that in the shop. It's like in our shop where it's like, yeah, work on this improvement thing in your free time, but if the machine stops, go start the machine again.
Right.
Don't That's higher priority. And so I think that kind of, you have to fall back on standard operating procedures a little bit, where you just have it be like, these things are subordinate to these other things,
Yeah.
and manage yourself basically within that. And then
Mhm.
the larger flow, I think, is a little bit bigger of a challenge. We had that conversation a couple of weeks ago off, on the phone, where I was expressing how much the job board has helped with that. And I think, I'm not sure if you talked about integrating that at all, but putting all of your Kanbans in one place so that you can see them relative to each other.
Yeah, it's definitely something we've been talking about,
Yeah.
and I like the idea, and I think we might do it, even if it's just as a step to learn about prioritization, like what could we change on the board to make it visually apparent, what should be addressed first, that
You could
kind of
almost
stuff.
do it like, like the classic like fundraising thing,
No.
where they put like
Uh,
$100,000 raised of a
right.
billion
Right.
desired or whatever, and they just like fill up the little
Yeah.
thing. Where it's like, if you just have, you could color code it where it like turns different colors, and the top it's red. It's like, this
Yeah.
needs to happen. If like Kanbans have filled up to a certain level, it's like, okay, that has to happen now, because that is clearly backlogged.
Yeah, I think my suspicion is that leaning on people to make those decisions is not the move for a number of reasons. One is you're like
Which decisions? The big decisions or the
the
in station?
the sort of in-station optimization stuff. I think for two reasons. One is it's mental load. The second and probably more important one is that I think sort of bottlenecks you in terms of improving, because you're not testing an explicit method of prioritization.
You're talking about not using standard operating
I would
procedures?
say explicit, only using standard operating procedures with no judgment, essentially.
Uh-huh.
No in-station judgment,
Uh-huh.
right? Like, if this is triggered, that gets done before this. In this station, we only stop, like in our assembly station right now, and I think we should, in saying this, we should make it explicit. You only stop working there if you've finished an order.
Uh-huh.
Like, you don't stop in the middle of an order, because you get
Yeah.
rejects,
Yeah.
you get or like mistakes and stuff, right? Like, I think making all these explicit forces you to run a scientific test on a hypothesis,
Uh-huh.
and then chances are learn that that hypothesis was not quite right. But then as a team, you can refine it instead of everyone sort of getting better and worse, but it's super unapparent how anyone is making the decisions.
Yeah.
I don't know. That would be my kind of,
This also sort of comes
but that's
back.
not very actionable.
Which part?
What I'm just saying, like, I don't know. Literally today, when we finish up recording and I go into the shop, what am I doing and where am I looking for that information
Uh-huh.
is a little unclear to me.
Yeah. The thought I just had is, this kind of comes back to like the moving bottleneck issue.
Mm-hmm.
And that really, like,
Totally.
we're trying to manage a system in a way that maybe isn't sustainable, in the sense that like you're trying to do it with too little labor.
I think that's partially true. Like, I did get that feedback from someone else of sort of, you can't have flow if you only have one person working a ton of stations, because actually everything waits while that person walks around.
Yeah.
But I think, again, getting back to that, like exploring the limits.
Yeah.
you're always going to have that to a degree. You don't have someone literally picking up a screw and screwing it in, and that's all they're. I mean, sometimes that happens, but very rarely. Like even, I
Yeah.
mean, I've toured like big facilities who are assembling whatever electronics,
Yeah.
and you'll have one station where they're putting in screws and maybe flipping a thing and inserting putting on the back of the casing and putting in more screws and then whatever, right? Like it's
Yeah.
a set of actions. It's not like literally one action.
Yeah.
Typically. So like, I don't think that is a hard. I don't think the answer is like we need to hire someone at every single station.
No, but
I
maybe
think,
making an explicit division of like,
interesting.
this person's responsible for this group
It's an interesting idea.
and this person's responsible for this group. And then you can, if there's an issue with grouping all of your Kanbans in one place and you wanted to have like, you could set an operating procedure for check this, check this, check this. If
I like that.
Yeah.
And even if it doesn't cut down on time right now, it would definitely help us learn. Right? Like we're still walking around the shop, which is silly and can be fixed.
Yeah.
But just as a precursor to, say, building like a bunch of lights that aggregate that data on one board.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need to jump into that project before we have a very clear understanding of how to prioritize.
Well, maybe you like treat it like zone defense in sports, where it's like, instead of dividing up tasks by like expertise, you literally divide it by like space in the shop, so that like a person can like look at a thing, turn around, look at a thing, turn around, look at a thing, and not walk around the shop. But
I like that.
Yeah.
I feel like that should have been obvious to me, but that is a very good point.
Yeah. I do think having all of the information in one place, like I think, yeah, if you had a giant factory, having all your Kanbans in one place wouldn't work. But since you are in a small factory and that waste is so minimal comparatively of walking an additional 10 feet to look at the board, or making it just visually visible from everywhere in the shop, I do think there's potentially a lot of benefit to be gained from having it all. Just the fact that you can compare it all against everything else.
And now that you say that, as you added workers to a system, I wonder if like trying to think like companies, let's say Toyota's factories now.
Yeah.
That may be true for every one person, that they have a place where they can look to know what to do. Do you know what I'm saying? And so like maybe I need to treat that the same for us now. Is my station is the whole shop.
Yeah.
But applying all the same rules that you sort of tried to apply within one quote unquote station to the whole shop might be worthwhile. Right? Like in your shipping area, you sort of ideally have all the information you need to do your work in one place. And I wonder if we can apply that same idea to.
Well, also, I wonder if there's any additional movement like with the Kanban cards, like presumably you have to walk the card to the place where it gets picked up.
Yeah.
Wherever it's being produced, the prior process. But if there's just an intermediate station where it sits prior to going to that next process, like there's not extra movement, hopefully.
And even if there is, my suspicion is that would not be a long-term solution, but I suspect it would be super informative to run for like a year or something.
It seems like most of, not that I've watched that many tours, but most of the tours I've seen have sort of a central hub that you can look at and see sort of the status of everything,
the load
in the
on
shop.
that area or something,
or often the whole shop.
Okay.
It seems like, I guess I'm thinking specifically back to that Closet Doctor one, where it was like they had a whiteboard with all their schedule, all of the traveler, or all of the checklists for every job was there, and could be compared. And
so they have a separate Kanban area for supplies.
So
maybe that's separate.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's
external
the question.
Orders versus internal orders. Is that the differentiator?
I don't know. Yeah.
You
don't really like your. Yeah. That is an interesting thing to think about, is like how you link those two, because they're not like explicitly linked until the very end of the process.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, definitely mulling that one over. I'm very curious to hear about your linked process fail.
Yeah, so this last week was kind of rough, honestly. Um, but it's cool to have. So basically, we had, I wouldn't call it like a cascade. It was more like a convergence of small failures
Mm-hmm.
that all kind of came together at once and ground the whole shop effectively to a halt.
Well,
Not entirely. Three of the four CNC machines, one was running for a day, or maybe two. There were Ariel and Corum were still busy doing stuff because there was a lot of things some deburring, which it's another question why they were deburring, but there was a lot of packing to be done deburring. So at least they weren't like standing idle.
right.
But essentially we had a large quote package come in that was like a big sort of interruption in my schedule. And also like
I'm not sure everyone would know what a quote package is, including me.
Yeah. So basically we received quite a number of prints that we had to quote parts. So we had to quote parts.
Okay.
They were all relatively complex, somewhat high stakes in the sense that I wanted the job. So I was putting maybe more attention to it than usual.
Sharpening the proverbial pencil.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it took up a bunch of time. I did an interesting thing where I timed a simple quote in my process, which I was going to do anyway, because I've been contemplating this automated quoting software. So like a run of the mill part out of like a material that we use all the time, from like opening an email from a customer to sending them a quote, was like 10 minutes.
Wow.
So not too bad.
That seems good.
Yeah. But then this big package took me like over half a day.
Across how many parts?
Across, what was it? It was like 12.
So isn't that,
I think
20 minutes? 20 minutes?
maybe.
Because what's that? 4 hours? Say?
Sure. Yeah.
So 4. Oh, no, I'm totally wrong.
I'm so bad at math in my head. There's no way I could do it.
No, that's right.
Okay. Well,
20 minutes.
That makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah.
But in any case, it was a big interruption. And at the end of it, I was like kind of fried. I just didn't have much bandwidth left. So I didn't really like look at our job board to see what was next.
Sure.
So that was one thing. I got behind on programming because of that. Secondly, this is another topic of how to handle change orders, but we had some change order. It's not entirely the customer's fault for sure. We had some change orders that used up material that we thought we had for an upcoming job. Didn't note that or order more. And so then I went to run a job that was already pre-programmed to repeat, and there was no material.
Damn.
So the next job scheduled for that, all the next jobs scheduled for that machine required a lot of programming. One other machine ran much faster through a job than I thought because it was on the gripper, and I hadn't actually done the math on how long it would take. I was like, oh, it's 200 parts. It's going to take a little while. And then it was done in like 4 hours. And I was like, okay.
That's crazy.
And then another one was just, I knew it was going to finish, but the other stuff got me so bogged down that I didn't get ahead in programming that.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to see, like, if you had a big shop with, a lot of quote unquote inventory and all of these stages, you wouldn't have noticed this delay.
Right. Because you'd always have parts to run and you'd always have tons of stock.
Yeah. But the issues in those systems would still exist. So I thought it was interesting just to see how obvious it was when these things kind of coalesced, and they're definitely making me think about how to improve every aspect of those processes, like really giving me a kick in the pants to figure some of these things out.
So I think some really important pieces there for sure. One is just like surfacing problems is a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think the knee-jerk reaction is you had too little inventory we should have bigger, like more inventory, right? We need more buffers everywhere, clearly, so we never have this problem again.
Yeah.
Instead of being aware of the fact that the goal is to have these problems. And that is explicitly the goal. I was listening.
Or to surface these problems and then correct
Yeah.
them.
So there was a Toyota plant in the US, and one month they had like 98 or 99% uptime, like they didn't stop the line.
Yeah.
And the manager came in and said, like the whatever, not manager, whoever it was at Toyota higher up came in and said, like, hey, you're not stopping the line. So every production process has problems. So you're hiding your problems, right? Like you need to be stopping the line more.
Yeah.
That was very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a bunch of like, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's like one root cause, but it basically comes down to what we were just talking about like prioritizing tasks and then like sort of visual controls. Like I was like your stock, the fact that it was not visually apparent when you went to get it.
Yeah.
That it was not visually apparent that it was already tied to a job that was scheduled.
Yeah.
Seems like
we're tackling that. So this was a job that got initially scheduled before we started doing our little job stickers.
Okay.
So I want to believe that will.
Oh, got it. So it would have a sticker on it. And then if you went to get it, you'd be like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Let me go figure out when this job is meant to run and if we can realistically steal the stock.
Yeah. So from starting a couple of weeks ago, every stock that comes in moving forward has a sticker on it that says what job it's assigned to. Assuming we do our ordering correctly, that shouldn't be easy to mess up. Were you going to say something?
I was going to say, if you had really fast changeovers, or universal, like, and truly standardized tooling across those two jobs, you could hypothetically flip-flop between the two, right? Run 1 hour on part one that was originally scheduled, and then 1 hour on part two that was like the change order, and sort of satisfy both and have the same runtime while you resupply in materials. So you'd sort of satisfy both customers potentially, which is the reason to read the book SMED. No. I mean, there's I don't know. Yeah. We don't have machines that hold a ton of tools, so that can often be a problem.
Yeah. It could be realistic sometimes.
Yeah.
Within a customer, I think so. Well, totally depends on the customer.
Right.
Yeah. This particular customer, we do some of that. Like actually the week prior leading up to that, we had a fixture detonate.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Spicy.
Yeah. We were using those ID expansion clamps.
Yeah.
And small ones, and they were real whittled down, like very little material left. Just because of the size of the hole they were going into and kind of like the way they work their size ranges.
Oh, they weren't whittled down from use.
No.
They were whittled down by design. Okay, gotcha.
But still not much material.
Yeah.
We were running a new part on them that I think I was just being a little too aggressive, basically. And it just fractured all the little wings on the ID clamps. Wow. Yeah, they just all of a sudden there was just this sound, and all three of us in the shop were like, what is going on? And it was literally just like loose. It was still clamped essentially, but the only thing attaching it was the little expansion screw. So it couldn't come off.
Oh geez.
But it was rattling around like
terrible.
Something fierce.
Oh no.
Yeah, so that was kind of a cool situation to be like, okay, we did do a changeover in like 20 minutes from that part to another part within the same family that we also needed to run.
Only 10 minutes to go to get to single minute.
Yeah.
No.
And then we were able to switch back on Monday when the new ID clamps came in. And it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but
so you don't have those stocked
spares. The ID clamps?
Yeah.
I do not. It was an experimental fixture.
Yeah.
That was working quite well.
And so there was no explicit transition to a fixture that you're going to go use on an ongoing like production basis.
No, it was not explicit. I think we will continue to use this just with some lessons learned about how we program for it.
The Google Home decided to listen in on our conversation.
Oh, hello.
Turned its lights on. That's kind of weird. I'm going to unplug it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have any like super deep like conclusions from that aside from it's very cool to I guess just bringing up the how do we view these failures and how do we move forward from them? What you brought up before, the knee-jerk reaction of adding buffer instead of being like, okay, so if I had this big quote package come in, how do I handle that in a way that it's not interruptive to the rest of the flow in the shop? Do I need to change how I prioritize it? Do I need to alter my quoting methodology?
Yeah.
Do I need to, instead of batching this, do I need to spread it out over a week where I do one part a day kind of a thing in a way that's
what is preventing me from doing that?
Yeah.
Yes, all that. And the other piece is, I think often the knee-jerk reaction of adding stock, the interesting piece there is it actually just increases the time between failures of running out. It doesn't actually solve the problem of running out, which I think like people often go like, oh, we ran out of toilet paper, we should buy more next time. It's like, well, you're going to run out again if you don't address the how does this get restocked in a systemized way? And so it's not actually a solution, even if people think it is,
right?
To just have more of the thing. It's like, okay, so we'll pay more for rent, more for management, more for like less cash turn through the business.
Yeah.
And we'll still run out.
Yeah. It's just forestalling the inevitable.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we should kick that to next week just because of the time. And then jump into some improvements.
Yeah. What time are we at here? Yeah, we should kick it to next week.
So I guess we'll jump into some improvements we've made in the shop today. Or not this today, but this week.
Yeah.
Do you want to start off?
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, we were a little bit underwater, so I felt like I wasn't doing a whole lot of improving, but actually we did some stuff. One was tried 3D printed gripper fingers for the first time, which was nice. Very cool. I'm a little curious how it's going to hold up with our particular coolant. But we didn't see any issues over. That was like a 200 part run. I haven't like done a full breakdown inspection or anything, but the parts ran good, and I peeked in there and they hadn't like melted into nothingness or anything.
Yeah.
I think that's going to open up some, for us specifically, I think that's going to open some doors for automating more parts. Not to get too into the weeds, but just allowing us to easily pick up finished parts with odd shapes after a second operation or when they're complete. So I'm pretty excited about that. We did implement the lathe parts counter.
Oh, cool.
Which was simple. I just hadn't done it.
And what was the effect?
We can track it now. There's still some things we need to do. One is that I don't have the M code for it set up in my post. So I have to manually put it in, and I forgot. On one parts run. So Corum came over and he's like, why does this say we have 0 parts done? And I was like, guess we're going to keep counting.
Interesting. And so the problem you noticed, the problem you noticed with the lathe was that there was a lot of counting happening at the lathe.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of the solution to
a lot of counting or a lot of just overproduction of it, just like running parts that we didn't need because no one had counted yet. And they just stuck another bar in and it, runs another 30 parts or however many are in a bar for that particular part.
Gotcha.
One aspect of it that I don't love, which I didn't realize was so great on the Brother machines until we didn't have it, was that it doesn't stop when it gets to the...
Oh.
That might be a parameter change.
You could probably write an if statement.
Potentially. Yeah, I'm sure we could.
That's like, check this. But at that point, I could see that.
So that I don't love, but it's still better than nothing.
Because at least you can walk up and check the number.
Yeah.
And have a live number.
Yeah. So I'm going to ping the distributor and see if that's a thing that we can change. If that's just a parameter switch to make it stop when it gets to the desired quantity. And then the last thing, which I'm kind of excited about, was these cycle start indicators.
Do you want to talk about the problem you noticed there?
Yeah, it actually wasn't an actual problem, but I could foresee the problem.
Okay.
I don't think we ever had Actually, that's not true. We did. I think one time I noticed that a tool had, so like Ariel was running parts on a machine.
Mm-hmm.
I happened to check it, noticed that a tool needed replacing. I pulled the tool.
Oh no.
It was a heat shrink tool.
Okay.
So I swapped it, and then we do our little like dunk and then run it into the sink to cool. So when it's in the sink, it's in the bathroom. You can't see it. So the tool was cooling. Ariel came by, saw that the machine was open, flipped apart, hit cycle start. Luckily, it wasn't the first tool, so it didn't actually cause a problem. But I had to be like, oh wait, whoa. I think it only happened once, but there's been quite a few. And now that there's 3 of us in the shop, and we all kind of like, not so much me, but occasionally we'll all start a machine again if we notice that it's stopped and the person who's sort of assigned to it is busy. There's been a few times where I've pulled a tool to swap it, and then I like run around to everybody, be like, don't start that.
Right.
Don't start that. And I just wanted to get away from that.
Yeah. So I think more broadly, and then I feel like your solution was extremely simple, devilishly simple. More broadly, like anytime there is a station or a tool or a process that can be in different states, it should be easy for people to communicate what state that station is in without walking around to tell everyone like, hey, don't use the lawnmower today because I drained the oil but don't have more oil or whatever. Exactly. I don't know.
Yeah. So my solution was I made a little magnetic cap that goes over the cycle start button and sticks there. It's red, so it's pretty obvious that means don't go. And the red one is completely covered, so you physically can't push the button. You'd have to remove it to push the cycle start button. Then I also made a yellow one that is open on the top, so you can push the cycle start button. So that indicates that someone is setting the machine up.
Okay.
Because you need to be able to push the button for tool setting
That's clever.
And probing and stuff. Yeah. But I still want it to be obvious that it's not ready to go. And then today I'm going to make green ones that are the same as the yellow one. But that will be an explicit, I'm done setting this machine up. It is now free to be run.
I like that because if you only did the red and yellow, it's ambiguous whether someone just forgot to change the tool or forgot to change the signal. Exactly. And so now I guess the standard is if there's no signal on the button, don't run the machine, go find out what it is.
Yeah. And that was kind of the conversation we had was they were both like, well, isn't it just like if there's no thing, it's just good to go? And I'm kind of like, but what if I forget?
Right.
I forget things all the time. What if you forget?
Yeah.
That kind of comes back to the Poka-yoke thing where they changed the name from like mistake proofing to error proofing because the assumption that they changed the term.
Yeah.
Because like
I think wasn't it idiot proofing or no?
It wasn't that blunt.
But it was something where it made people feel bad.
Well, it sort of implied that some people don't make mistakes.
Oh.
And that it was like, that it was just sort of like oriented towards the people that do make mistakes when the reality is we all make mistakes or we all make errors.
Right.
And so changing it to error proofing is like basically just being realistic about the fact that it's going to happen.
Yeah. And I think it's important also if it isn't happening, it's because the person is exerting a huge amount of mental like attention. Yeah. Like super vigilant. Like, when you like start a new job and you're like, all right, got to do this well. And then later you relax. That's really nice. I actually saw you did that and I was like, that makes so much sense. So I only have the red one so far.
Yeah.
And I ordered, more colors of 3D printed filament. I've been on a big color coding supplies ordering kick. They're so cheap and they're awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So that was kind of our thing for the week. Aside from
those sound like
we're mostly noticing problems this last week.
Interesting. That's a whole nother conversation about how to log problems that we're sort of running into in a way that is easy to sort.
Yeah.
And find, and they don't get lost, and you don't end up doing double entries, all that. And how do we have a certain limit of numbers of items on the board before we just like stop production and like spend a whole day just running through those? I don't know. Anyway,
interesting.
It's a whole
Yeah.
thing.
So what do you got?
Yeah. So this week, we had one very simple one. So we noticed that our bins that circulate between our shipping station and our assembly station, sometimes would go on the chute the wrong way. So facing the wrong way. And so then it was sort of non-standardized. And so then you can't sort of like just build a habit of how you move because the bins were coming down the chute sort of all different ways.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, yeah. So I think instead of going and talking to everyone and being like, hey guys, like this needs to happen, like it's important. The best part is I didn't make this improvement. Sam just put a label that has an arrow. It just says like bin front and there's an arrow.
Uh-huh.
And so now at least the information is there about which way they do go, which is nice. I was wondering I've been thinking about how to make it more obvious which way they go instead of having to read.
Are they the ones with like the tapered front?
Yeah.
And do they go in sideways or they go in endways?
They go in sideways. So I was thinking about doing a cardboard cutout on the front of the chute. But then was wondering if mentally it would be really clear which way they go, or you'd have to look at it and do some spatial reasoning.
That seems like...
But maybe that's fine. Or is a label better? Or I was also wondering if the most... this is probably getting too... but it was sort of an interesting thought. I was also then wondering about coloring one side of the bin and putting a matching colored rail on one side of the chute.
Oh, yeah.
Because that feels less tricky mentally to rotate an object to figure out how it fits through a shape. Now, granted, I feel like this is a thing we give to babies to do.
I was just going to say it's kind of like a square peg in a square hole.
Yeah, it's like, put the shapes in the right hole.
I feel like we're pretty good at doing that, like mindlessly, more or less. But
so actually, I read a study on rotating shapes in your head, and basically, it takes a certain, like you're essentially rotating it in your head.
Yeah.
Meaning that the more degrees of rotation you have to do, the longer it takes.
Oh, interesting.
And then the other piece was there was an experiment of adding color to an object that you have to spatially rotate in your head. And people who are really bad at like mental rotations of like objects relied on the colors basically, and were able to do it a lot faster with the color.
Oh, interesting.
So I was kind of like, maybe color is good. The thing is, we're running into a problem of just like, what does color mean in our shop? And is it standard across the shop or is it not? Or like,
I think the bigger question here is like, why are they coming in not already in the right direction?
Well, you lift them off of the scale onto the chute. Well, another question is maybe we just need symmetrical bins.
Yeah.
Right. Put them in anyway and it's right.
There you go.
Yeah.
Let's ask why a few more times.
They're really cheap bins.
You should get shallow bins.
Interesting.
Those little ones that are because they're also on a standardized grid spacing. Right. So you might find lots of other uses for them in the shop.
Interesting. Well, this is a good time to look at that because we're about to.
Yeah. They don't stack though, which you seem to do some stacking. But that's also...
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah, we're moved away from stacking.
I think that's smart.
Very efficient.
Yeah. And it tips easily if you mess something up. Right. Yeah. Shallow bins are symmetrical.
Okay. So maybe look for symmetrical bins.
Multitude of sizes.
Maybe constrain the bin through the whole process so you don't have to reorient it. That is another question. Why is it getting reoriented?
Yeah.
And thinking about it, I think we have to change the shipping station. So the chute feeds right down onto the scale. Okay. Well, yeah. If we're asking why enough times, why are we weighing is because we haven't taken the time to build out a very accurate model in our website of the weights of every single product, which considering the very few number of products we do is somewhat inexcusable. It is a little bit, I don't know. I like tried to do it and messed it up and, I should revisit that. My takeaway is, that's, I mean, I don't know if it fixes the bin orientation problem, but it probably is a better improvement than standardizing that would be. Yeah. Well, good call. Yeah.
That was funny.
Yeah. I mean, this is good to talk about. So let's see. What else do we have? Oh yeah, so this is a tricky one. We're working on a new product that is going to use stainless pins.
Yeah.
We're going to offer it in stainless and titanium.
Yeah.
Titanium is lighter but substantially more expensive.
Yeah.
Um, so now we have identical parts in stainless and titanium,
Uh-huh.
which are different weights for sure. But if you're picking up one pin, it is hard to tell.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of trying to figure out how to deal with this in the shop before it goes live, because I feel like it could be
Just the sorting.
making sure they stay separate. So we run it on the same tooling in the mill.
Yeah.
Like everything's the same except the material. Like they look the same virtually.
Yeah.
And so just like making sure that batches come out of the mill marked, go to a place that is marked. And then the bigger issue is like, if anything ever, I don't know, it just seems like a small slip up could so easily go wrong and ship the wrong pins to the wrong people.
Well, how are you tracking your other product?
I mean, they always have Kanban cards with them. So
Okay.
that is a solution. But like even at the assembly station, it would be so easy to reach for the wrong bin. Like in your head, it's a pin.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're
I
in
guess,
different color bins.
yeah, maybe go back to color and like make it, I mean, I guess my knee jerk is to say like this isn't a situation that's unique to the pins. It's just like appears unique to the pins.
I think it appears unique because they're not visually distinguishable. And so it just seems really challenging. I know it's not a problem that's like a big, like people have solved this problem. People deal with this all the time.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, the simplest thing would just be like distinguish them in space. Like don't put them next to each other. So that it's, so you're having to make sort of a more conscious choice.
Right. Then you're sacrificing every assembly process.
Are you?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe. Sorry, I'm just pausing because I'm just trying to think this through.
No, I know. I was like
talk.
looking at it. I don't know. It's a tricky one.
Assuming, I guess this comes back to standard operating procedure. Assuming people are reading or following a standard operating procedure for assembly, this shouldn't be an issue. And so it just comes down to how are you defining that information that they follow. So maybe maybe you don't treat them as a unique thing, but you color code every part of an assembly somehow or another.
Yeah, we've started doing that. I think the issue comes back to ShipStation, which is what's generating the order slip. And we haven't, maybe I can color code it, and then we need a thermal printer that does color, or we do it on the screen still. If it had color, that would help.
What if you have a lot of different color buckles too?
Yeah, and then so having color
a lot of variations
on colors is kind of a funny thing.
Yeah.
Which we've already run into a little bit.
Huh.
So that'll be for continued consideration. These aren't, let's see.
What if there was some kind of like a little block, like a physical barricade?
Yeah.
That caused the assembly person to make a choice before grabbing.
Interesting. Almost like a window that you slide left or right, and one is like stainless and the other is titanium,
something
or
like
something.
That.
So
maybe
you have to
choose.
That's an interesting idea.
It's it's kind of one of those things that's like annoying because you're adding time to your process, but if it saves defects and rework, it's probably worth it.
There's a lot of work that goes into shipping a bad order.
Yeah.
Both in terms of like customer satisfaction, making them feel like we care and will attend to it.
What about
replying to emails?
I'm not sure how this would work, but what if you had like what if you had sliding windows for each of your kind of like variations? And so somebody looked at the order and they slid the windows to something that was very easily visible for each of the different variables.
Right.
And then you just pick from what's visible. So like you're
I
choosing,
like that a lot.
instead of choosing by looking at the product, you choose by looking at like your pre-selected options, and then the product is made visible to the
I
person.
like that a lot. I feel like that's a nice combination of the things we'd been considering, which was like, I don't know if you remember, I was talking about like adding LEDs
Yeah.
to illuminate under each one, but like physical obstruction is better than LEDs.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about making like an easy analog that is sort of a memory tool, but you're sort of like, well, combine those two.
Uh-huh.
And your memory tool is slide the window to expose the product you're trying to.
Yeah.
Interesting. We could also do one window and then a rotating carousel behind each window. And then you rotate to the...
Uh-huh.
That might be harder.
Oh, kind of like do you remember, like, I don't even know if they have them anymore, but like in old school lumber yards,
begging to be motorized.
old school lumber yards and hardware stores, they'd have the rotating bins full of nails where you get bulk nails.
Right.
And if you had that where
behind a window,
and then you just, and it was labeled.
Right.
So you couldn't do it on automatic. That would actually be easy to, if you wanted to make it electrical and motorized as well, you could program it very quickly.
Interesting.
Yeah. And you'd have like one for
something makes me think that the
pins, cams, and
the inertia of the product is a lot higher than the inertia of like a window. So it might make sense to move the window, because I'm imagining like spinning that thing all day back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah, it probably comes down to like physical layout and the engineering challenge of it.
Yeah. Interesting. Something to think about. We don't have much time.
I like that though.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We've been thinking a lot about moving our assembly station, and just some other stations up into the loft, which means a redesign, which means an opportunity to think about what we're trying to achieve. The big thing that we're sort of thinking about, which gets to our conversation in previous weeks about flex and how to deal with peaks and valleys in your production. And so our cells, we're trying to design so that they're optimized for one person, but can easily move to two-person cells to double their throughput. But anyway, so I've been thinking a lot about that. That's not an explicit improvement. I heard a great term, Ohio, which is only handle it once.
I think that is like going back to the early like question of like what to do
cheap improvements
as a noob, and like cheap improvements. Just do everything with that in mind.
Yeah, totally. So I heard that in relation to email, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Hard to execute. I mean, not hard to execute. Take some discipline to look at an email and not open it until you're ready to fully handle it.
I take that, like, I don't know. It is a hard balance sometimes, but in machining strategy, I'll go a long ways to make it so that we don't handle the part more times.
In terms of like flipping the part from machining?
Flipping the part, machine to machine, all of that kind of stuff. Like,
interesting.
Slower process that will result in less person handling is almost always better.
Yeah, to the point where, I don't know if you've watched the shop tour that Saunders did of Metal Quest, I think it was.
I didn't get through the whole thing, but I've watched most of it.
They had an outlandish number of 90-degree milling heads.
Oh, yeah.
Which are like, I think $6,000 a piece easily, like 6 to 12, depending on the size.
Yeah.
Which seems expensive, but they are so gung-ho.
Right.
And they do huge volumes, but yeah, it's like, can we do this in one setup and really one setup? And it is so beneficial.
Well, and if you think about, like, I think it related to their product, but the cost of that versus the cost of a fourth axis, which can do the same kind of thing, because weren't they running those on 3-axis machines primarily?
I don't remember. I thought they were running them on horizontals. I think they run them across their shop. I think it's just like, if they can eliminate another setup,
do it.
Doesn't matter how expensive that tool is. I mean, to a point probably, but
that kind of harkens back to a phrase I heard recently, which was just that, like, and this is a good thing to keep in mind just across the board, is that operational costs trump capital costs. Always.
Trump as in
you need to prioritize reducing operational costs over prioritizing. If you can, if you can spend capital, even though it's painful in the moment and seems terrifying, to reduce overall ongoing operational costs, like, So probably if you were to plug their little right angle head things into your fancy spreadsheet for like return on investment,
it's like 3 days.
probably very good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ohio, only handle it once. I like that, and it's stuck in my head. So I've been trying to apply it. Okay, we have a few more, but we're at like an hour and a half, so maybe I'll just kick those next week.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right.
Cool. Well, I think that's it for the week.
That's it. Thanks to everyone who's followed us on Instagram. That is incremental CI is our username, or whatever it's called on Instagram. Our at. Please follow us and tag us in improvements so we can share them with everyone else, and we can all sort of get inspired and see the different simple things people are doing. It seems simple, but still need to be done.
Yeah. And it's now on Apple Podcasts. If you've been listening to this on a platform that you dislike, then you prefer Apple, you can switch back. Or if you've been sending it to a friend and they are like, sorry, can't listen to it, I don't have Spotify, now you can.
And speaking of which, please do send it to your friends. And yeah, I think that's about it. So till next week.
All right. Have a good one.